Well, welcome everyone. My name is Cynthia Jackson and I'm the Executive Director of the Educare Learning Network. We are here today to share at the Educare Network's research findings and what we're learning in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've made it through a really challenging year, as you all know, but we recognize that there will be future crises also are sometimes inevitable. Therefore, our panelists today will focus on the future direction for early childhood care and education practices, programs, research, and policies to better support young children and families and the professionals that support them. We'll also examine the disproportionate effects of COVID-19 on both the communities in which Educare schools operate, which are low-income neighborhoods where many Black and Brown children reside, and our workforce. As most of you already know, early childhood professionals are overwhelmingly women of color who this past year have juggled how to safely care for, educate, and serve young children and their families, all while managing personal and family stressors and uncertainties. Thanks for joining us for this important discussion. And I'm now happy to introduce my colleague, Amanda Stein, Director of Research and Evaluation for the Educare Learning Network. Amanda?
Thanks, Cynthia. And welcome, webinar attendees. Just want to direct you to submit any questions that you may have for today's panelists and speakers through our Q&A function. And we have folks monitoring that will respond, and we'll hope to get to some of those live today with our panelists. I'm so happy to be here today on behalf of the Educare Learning Network. For those of you who don't know us, the Educare Learning Network is one of the nation's most diverse and effective networks of high quality early childhood schools. We are learning hubs that innovate, evaluate, share best practices, and advocate for policy change to transform the lives of young children and their families in under-resourced communities and to positively impact the broader early childhood field. Our panel discussion today will examine what we've learned collectively over the past year of the COVID-19 pandemic, and more importantly, how our future practice and policy priorities will be shaped as we look to an uncertain but hopeful future. The Educare Learning Network has refined the essential competencies for early childhood leaders and programs by focusing not only on practice, but also on understanding and articulating the intersection between practice, policy, and research as a way to leverage change in the early childhood field. Our Educare Insights research snapshots on COVID, and by extension our webinar today, build on that intersection, as we will examine not only our research about how Educare schools pivoted to serve children and families and their workforce during the pandemic, but also how what we've learned will impact our future practice and policy directions. Now on to our qualitative research findings. The research findings that I will provide a brief overview of today were based on qualitative interview data that were gathered by local evaluation partners affiliated with each of our Educare schools. Namely, we were able to leverage our collective research practice partnerships, or RPPs, to pivot and capture approaches and learnings under these unexpected conditions. These interviews were conducted in the late spring and summer of 2020 and included Educare staff in a variety of leadership, managerial, and direct service roles. What follows is a summary of our qualitative analyses. As we analyzed the interview data, some common themes arose around supporting students' learning and development. Those themes from a staff's perspective, including developing and transitioning to a virtual or remote approach to teaching and learning. 2, a heavy emphasis on the social and emotional needs of young learners and how to have nurturing relationships and provide supports in this domain from a distance. And 3, a need to make modifications for students who needed more individualized supports, such as dual language learners, children with or at risk for disabilities, and other priority populations. Among these themes, we noted some challenges, such as an increased demand or ask of families to both provide care and facilitate children's learning, kind of a kitchen sink approach to virtual learning early on, and changes or interruptions in eligibility, enrollment, and continuation of services provided outside of Educare schools. We also noted some strengths, such as EduCare staff being very thoughtful about welcoming new children and families and supporting students through transitions under these unusual conditions. Some of our key practice and policy suggestions are: help families navigate challenges related to remote learning and teaching by providing them with clear materials, lesson plans, and activities that clarify teaching responsibilities, identify areas of focus, and suggest effective strategies. Engage in communities of practice or peer learning groups to share and learn best practices and effective virtual learning techniques among staff. And develop strategies to help children and families prepare for transitions in routines and environments ahead of time so that they are prepared for change, such as the return to in-person classroom and instruction after periods of learning at home, mask wearing, new staff, all of those sorts of transitions that come in an early learning environment. Okay. Common themes around supporting engaging families from a staff's perspective included: 1, addressing families' basic needs through direct supports, such as food, water, money, supplies. 2, thoughtfully redefining, streamlining, and improving communication with families at this time. And 3, frequently engaging families to understand their changing needs and circumstances. Among these themes, we again noted some challenges, such as the instability of childcare, housing, and finances for families, technology-related barriers and learning curves, and barriers to identifying evidence of trauma. Some of our key practice and policy suggestions include: it's critical to establish and maintain community-based partnerships to link families to needed resources, services, and information. And early childhood programs can serve as a hub for doing this. More communication is not always helpful, but effective communication is. So be cautious of information overload and tailor information to families' individual needs. Make personal family technology resources available, such as data plans, cell phones, computers, hotspots, to help close the digital and resource gaps that lead to inequities in remote learning and access to community resources. And secure adequate funding, access, and resources for staff to attend professional development related to supporting families' technology use and accessing mental health and public assistance support for families in early childhood programs. Next. Common themes around supporting the early childhood workforce from a staff's perspective included: 1, school leadership prioritizing staff's mental and physical health and well-being. 2, leaders and staff collaborating to redefine expectations, roles, and accountability and communication mechanisms. And 3, remaining engaged in ongoing professional learning during this time. Among these themes, we noted some challenges, such as practitioners being considered essential workers, but often being undervalued by society. 2, adjusting to working from home realities and navigating work-home life balance took a lot of time and effort, as we can all attest to. Also, reimagining more intensive embedded professional development experiences and implementing them under these unique conditions. We also noted some strengths, such as stable funding, maintained wages, health coverage, and work options for early childhood professionals. But we note that this wasn't universal or even equitable across early childhood settings and program types and locations. Another strength was building and maintaining relationships, making social connections, and supporting mental and emotional well-being of staff virtually, as well as more frequent, better communication and maintaining a positive organizational climate, even when working in a socially distanced way. Some of our key practice and policy suggestions include a very obvious one, which is readily integrating opportunities for gratitude, celebration, and fun for staff. Expanding access to a range of mental health and wellness resources for staff, including mental health consultation. Maintaining or right-sizing and strengthening the frequency and modality of communication and regular routines of professional collaboration and learning, and securing adequate funding, access, and resources related to staff's well-being and learning needs, such as better pay and benefits, technology, professional development opportunities, physical and mental health supports, health and safety supplies, etc. That concludes our summary of our qualitative research findings for today. And now we're going to turn to our panelists, but to learn more, we will direct you to some of our written materials on this in the latter part of our webinar. So now I have the honor of introducing our amazing group of panelists and national experts. From the Educare Learning Network, I would like to introduce Amy Lapointe, Education Director for Educare Winnebago, Brenda Ganeson, Mentor Coach for Tulsa Educare MacArthur, and Sharita Anderson, Director of Family Service and Assistant School Director for Educare New Orleans. Following our panel discussion of Educare Learning Network members, we will hear from our esteemed national expert, Dr. Jacqueline Jones, who is the President and CEO of the Foundation for Child Development. Let's turn to our panel. So the first person I have a question for on our panelists today is Sharita. Sharita, New Orleans is not new to navigating a major crisis. In fact, your Educare school was established as part of a community redevelopment effort to revitalize an area of the city that was devastated by Hurricane Katrina. How has this history and those prior experiences prepared your school community to weather this current storm? Sharita, you're on mute. You can come off mute now.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Amanda.
No worries.
We like to say that in New Orleans, we are the epitome of resilience. The world watched, took notes, and learned from our government, people, and more from Katrina. Educare New Orleans sits in the footprints of Columbia Park, and it was a purpose-built community. What we once was an 18-block notorious housing development is now a community that excludes hope and livelihood. So when we closed in March 13 due to COVID, my staff and I knew remaining intentional and involved was the only route for our families. We went full virtual in the blind. With the first 7 days of closing Educare, we was already doing virtual learning. Education practice and family engagements not only kept our families going, but it also gave us a sense of normalcy during the stressful time because we're so used to work and being at home on lockdown. It was very stressful for us and the staff and also the kids. So just seeing our families on videos, seeing our kids interacting with us, smiling, laughing, it just made us a little bit less stressful.
Thank you for sharing those reflections. My next question is for Amy. Educare Winnebago is located on the Winnebago Indian Reservation in Northeast Nebraska. As the only Educare school to serve primarily Native American children and families, and given the disproportionate effect of COVID-19 on Native Americans, how do you feel your school community's experience of the pandemic has been unique?
Good afternoon. So for our community, I think three C words really come to mind: communication, collaboration, and community. We are a small community, so we're probably no more than 1,200 people here. We have one primary school. We have a parochial school, K through 8, Educare. We do have a tribal college. So what was really unique for us and for our specific tribe is that we really came together and, we realized we weren't prepared for things like this. None of our policies, none of, the things that we had in place at the time helped us figure this out. So we had to create policies. We had to really work together, and we tried to align each of our schedules so that, no matter where our kids were placed, whether they were in Educare or at the school, we tried to align our practices so that no matter where the child was, that the policies were similar, basically. So there wasn't, okay, over here, Educare does this, over here, they do that. So we really worked together. There was a subcommittee created just for education. So we all, informed each other on a weekly basis what each place was doing, how we could help each other. I really think that sense of community for us was huge. It brought to light that we, are stronger when we work together. And so I think that was, I'm not sure what happened outside in any other tribe, but I feel like that was unique for us because we experienced that. We have our own hospital, so they were involved in all of, whatever plans that were put in place by the staff here. We ran them through the health department. They aligned them with the CDC, and so they knew what we were doing. They approved it. So we always had the backing of our health department. I just really think that communication piece was huge and just showed what we can do as a community to keep, the pandemic numbers low. For us, we had very minimal cases within our center with things that are going, and I really attribute that to this process of strong communication.
Yeah, definitely strong communication, and it sounds like quite a bit of within your community cross-sector collaboration too. When you're talking about the education committee, you're talking about more than just infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. You were talking about the entire educational pipeline from birth through college, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and your role it supports that entire educational continuum as well.
Correct.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Brenda, I'm going to turn to you next as our third panelist. Your school, Tulsa Educare MacArthur, is one of our 4 Educare schools in the city of Tulsa. And 3/4 of your classrooms at your school are infant and toddler classrooms, and about half of your students speak a home language other than English. In your role as mentor coach, what stands out to you in how you reprioritized or adapted your approach to best support your infant toddler teachers to enable them to continue to provide services to young children and their families, in particular, those that are dual language learners?
Just realized I'm on mute.
That's okay.
Thank you, Amanda. It was a wonderful learning with pandemic giving a lot of challenges to us. We supported, as Amy said, support was the first thing. We gave a lot of emotional support to our teachers. We wanted to find out new ways to support the families. So as an agency, they took the decision of first opening for a small number of families and welcoming only the volunteer teachers who are ready to come to school and try all the safety norms and make it more comfortable for the other teachers to come in. So some of the teachers came in. So with them, we formed groups, teams for inviting the parents. So we thought of all creative ways to make videos for parents on how the procedure would be, because the dropping off and picking up was not inside the school. They had to drop their children out, which they are not, used to. So we had to find new ways to, give them that confidence of, hey, we are here to take care of your kid. And the teacher is not the one who is used to them. So it's a new set of teachers whom they are going to get exposed to. So we called it the community of care, and we connected the primary care teachers with them and created videos of introducing the new teachers to the parents and made videos of how the children would come into the school along with the children and how they would be, handed back to the parents. And the whole thing, along with the children, we did a practice day and everything was videographed. And we did a lot of transition on Zoom, along with the old teachers introducing, the primary caregivers introducing the community caregivers. And it was such a beautiful transition, and children really picked up on things and, having masks and not having masks. So we made videos on all those things. And it was a beautiful transition that happened, and we got to learn a lot.
I really appreciate that thoughtfulness around the community of care that you created, and how much intentionality you really put into transitions, which are so important for our youngest learners and especially our dual language learners as well.
Yeah.
So now I'm going. What's that?
Sorry. I just missed this point. We intentionally had at least one Spanish speaking person in every team, so the parents can easily communicate with them.
Wonderful. So you were doing some
Yeah.
connection with dual language staff to dual language families, Spanish speaking families. And then any use of Spanish in your videos that you were creating? Wonderful. I got a head nod. Okay. Well, now I'm going to turn to some questions that are kind of open here for our panelists to react to and share their thoughts on, rather than directed at one particular person. We'll start off with, given that we're early childhood, being strength-based is in our fiber and in our being. So we'll start off with some successes. What were some successes that your school experienced or strengths you demonstrated when providing high-quality programming and services to young children and their families? So just giving us an example or two, and examples possibly from supporting the early childhood professionals during the pandemic. And then also speak to how you plan to carry those forward into your post-pandemic practice. So strengths and successes, a couple examples, one or two, and how you plan to carry those forward.
I'll start.
Thanks, Sharita.
I know for sure we really concentrated on our staff morale and also the school environment. So we were one of the first sites to open back up fully. We opened up all 12 of our classrooms in July 2021. And we knew that our teachers had extreme concerns about being afraid of the unknown. So we was very upfront, and we was honest with our staff and also the members of leadership about the concerns going into classrooms, COVID, social distancing. You know, we all were really afraid. But we knew that we had to come up with a way the staff motivated and supported. Although we couldn't change having to return to work because a lot of staff wanted to stay home, and because we were just afraid. But you know, how can we make the environment safe and welcoming, and also be supportive to our families and also to our staff? So we beefed up our celebrations. We had more staff that we acknowledge their works. We have more supervisors that acknowledge the staff work on a daily basis. We did like daily motivations. On our professional development day, instead of focusing on the intentional work, we concentrated on self-help skills, like what's going on, mental days, like, you know, what's going on in the classrooms, how can we support you? We did activities, events. One of my PD days, we had like a surprise event. Miss Angie had award days. So we had like funny awards. We give the staff like awards for the best smile, and then she gave out gifts. And that just those small tokens, the staff was really excited. They felt appreciated. They felt heard. Just celebrate them, let them know that we do care. We're going through this together. You know, we know this scary time, but we are here together as a family. So we just support and celebrate all the time.
That's wonderful. And what from that which you tried and found successful over the past year, what of that do you all hope to carry forward into the future in terms of your practice?
I'm thinking that what we can carry forward is being transparent with our staff. Like I said, when we came back, it was going to be a lot of concerns around COVID. So they made us be more vigilant about support, because sometimes you can get kind of relaxed on how to support staff. But when COVID came to the picture, it made you think about the mental aspects, mental of all your staff members. So it just made us be more concerned and being more intentional and making sure that our reflective practice is done, and is done in a way that we really hear what our staff is communicating to us. So I know for sure I went from doing reflective practice with 4 of my staff members to doing all 12. So that was having a one-on-one. I can see what's going on with them, see what's going on with me, just having a safe space for our staff. And I think that was a really big turning point, because as sometimes staff and leadership don't agree. So for leadership to be a little vulnerable and being that listening, supportive ear, I think that resonated with a lot of staff members.
Definitely that transparency and vulnerability. And I also heard you say that you were part of your professional development or learning that you were doing among your staff was to teach and to practice self-help skills or self-care skills and strategies. That's very interesting as well. Brenda,
Yes.
did you want to share something that you all found to be a strength, or that you found a success you wanted to highlight from your experiences over the past year?
Yeah, sure. So as Sharita said, emotional, acknowledging their emotional realities, and taking, the teachers into all the decision-making process. That was something we really loved doing. Initially, it was hard for us to say, this is all new. We are all in this together, and no one knows the right way of doing things. So let's all figure it together, and sharing the power of taking responsibilities. We took all the teachers in, and we used to have team meetings to, put everything on the table and discuss, hey, this is what we have to, do next. Give us your thoughts. And it was unbelievable to see that we got such innovative thoughts coming in. Like all the video, all those initiatives came from the teachers. So it was all 60 minds put together to come up with thoughts. So it was a lot of parallel processing. So this is what we want the teachers to do with the children in the classroom. So first, as leaders, we wanted to do that. And it was a wonderful learning to see that, teachers just brought in a lot of information for us to process and take it in a good direction. To have that connection with the parent. The parents were in, they gave us a lot of inputs. So when we did something, we took their feedback on how we can do that. And parents would give us some feedback, and then we would implement that as well into whatever we were doing. So things started becoming better and better each day. So that was really awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate your reflection on the parallel process that you had between staff and children and between staff and leadership. That's wonderful. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the challenges. The pandemic has been challenging to early childhood programs, practitioners, and families alike in many ways. As you reflect over the past year's experiences, which challenges stand out to you, or what is one problem that you solved within your school community, or that you worked to address and how did you overcome them? And how will what you've learned through those challenges impact your post-pandemic programming? How about we hear from Amy, since we didn't hear from you last round? Something that stands out to you as like a problem you were able to solve at Educare Winnebago, or a challenge you navigated through and overcame?
I think for Educare Winnebago, it was really not, realizing early on we were not prepared for something like this to happen. And for the leadership team to meet regularly and, just really try to hash it out, how we could make the safest place for the kids, for the staff. But it was just, we just were not prepared. And I think that was across the board. When we would participate in meetings, we would hear that, over and over. But I really feel like our team, was leaders in making sure that everything was safe, and, for the kids to come back in the building, and the processes they came up with,
So it sounds like you have some health and safety kind of protocols, procedures, processes in place that you can leverage going forward, where anything pandemic-like to occur again in the future. Any other kind of takeaways from that first feeling of kind of being shocked and taken off course and ill prepared, now that you've spent a year finding your way? Any other pieces that you would kind of take going forward?
Well, I think so with our subcommittees, we've, even when the pandemic is over, we all agreed we need to keep doing it. We need to stay in communication with each other. So I think that's one thing that was lacking here. We didn't even think about it, until this. So we've all said, this has to continue whether or not we're out of the pandemic. We got to meet regularly. So all the entities within our community meet and let each other know what's going on and how we can help one another.
Yeah, so that interdisciplinary kind of communication, collaboration, and coordination is something that you guys want to really hold on to
Yeah.
beyond this. Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, I will turn to our next question. Well, actually, I should probably let one more person respond to that. Sharita or Brenda, did you want a chance to share a challenge that you felt like you successfully overcame and have a takeaway from this past year?
I had a challenge, I'm just transitioning to this role. So I was once a master teacher at a time, and it was very difficult for our infant and toddlers to do virtual learning through the pandemic. And it really was hard for the parents because the parents really had to sit in front of the computer and interact with their child and also with the teacher. So it was really, we felt that some of the milestones wasn't met with our TAS goals. It was just it was stressful for the parents and also for the students. And with our preschool families, we were so afraid because we had preschoolers going to kindergarten. So we want to make sure they was kindergarten ready. So that was another stressor for our teachers. And we're trying to make sure that we're playing catch up to make sure that they have the tools that they need to go to kindergarten. So it was a challenge for us. So now we're trying to make sure that we stay with our virtual platforms, but invest more in it in training so that we can let our families know this is what we're going to continue to use, but don't have it as so stressful for the parents, because I think it was stressful for them with everything that was going on, job loss and everything else. And then on top of that, on the computer with their child for 2 to 3 hours a day. So I think that was really stressful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so really navigating those stressors for sure. So another question for you all. Challenges resulting from the pandemic have been further exacerbated by the ongoing pandemic of systemic racism. How has this been evident or experienced by your particular EduCare school or community? And what do you feel like needs to happen within the early childhood system to address the historical and contemporary inequities and injustices experienced by communities of color? Sharita, you want to go?
Yeah, we haven't really faced any discrimination, but leadership, as a leadership member, we participated in a 3-day DEI in-service protocol entity. And during this time together, we discussed DEI issues with the staff and also the participants. And from that discussion, we had a town hall meeting with Kingsley House staff, and we had a DEI discussion. And then we shared the new trainings and the programs that will be visible. Kingsley House also revised their mission statement to include statements supporting to diversity, equality, and also inclusion. So our human resource department is in the process of rolling out a training session that should begin in July to assist further with racism, biases, and equality.
So Kingsley House is your parent organization, and you said they had some concerted efforts around diversity, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Brenda or Amy, did either of you want to weigh in and share your thoughts on that question? Brenda's nodding, so go ahead, Brenda.
Yeah, I agree with Sharita. Like, we worked a lot as an agency. This year we had diversity and inclusion as our goal. So we created a committee, the DEI committee, to think about how can we implement, and bring more equality in the agency. So we had people from different walks of life come in and join and create a committee together. So they started thinking about how can we take it to the classrooms? How can we really see what is, about the implicit bias in the classrooms? We are still working on it. I wouldn't say we have walked a long way. Everything started just before pandemic, and we have been working through the pandemic on that. So we have been reading books on, anti-bias classrooms and, don't shy away from racism and all those things. So we read those books, reflect, and so we have created committees in every school as well, apart from the agency committee. So they guide us on how to do things. So the one thing as we walk through this process, what we found was we are missing, resources to read books to children. So we are really working on creating some social stories and reading it to children so they can do that in the classroom. So this is something we have been working on and we are still working on. So we really want to work on bringing equality, and that is a goal of our agency this time.
So it sounds again like more of that parallel process, Brenda, where you all are learning together as a community of professionals, leaders and staff, learning and improving together, and you're sharing those learnings in developmentally appropriate way through literature, children's literature, for example, in the classroom.
Yes, of course, yeah. And that's a wonderful learning. Like, we come to realize about ourselves a lot. We think, hey, we are professionals. We don't have this bias, and we come to understand, I didn't even realize I'm thinking this way, and that's such a wonderful feeling when you get that. Of course, it pushes you down. How could I think like that? And then, bounce back and say, hey, we are human beings, and you have an effect of what you happened earlier in your life, but it's time to give yourself grace and move on.
Well, certainly growth is about those vulnerabilities and that introspection and reflection. So I'm going to just say, in the interest of time, because we want to allow some questions from our audience, that I'm going to turn us over now to our national expert discussant, Dr. Jacqueline Jones, and then we will bring all of our group back together, panelists, myself, and Dr. Jones, to engage in some Q&A with our attendees via the Q&A function. So thank you so much, panelists, for sharing your reflections, and we'll hear more from you in just a moment. And Dr. Jacqueline Jones, please welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to be here and kind of share your remarks and expertise on this subject today. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Amanda. I so appreciate the invitation to join this conversation and to learn more about the work of Educare partners during the pandemic. The past year has brought unimaginable challenges across the globe. When the pandemic began, it was clear that we needed to understand its impact on early care and education. And COVID-19 has shed a bright light on an already fragile system. I'll talk a bit about national findings and then take a look at family child care, preschool, in a specific state. I think you'll find that the research reflects what you've been hearing from our Educare professionals. And there also will be or should be links in the chat to some of the references that I'll be making throughout my talk. Early on, Yale researcher Walter Gillingham began a large-scale survey of over 50,000 childcare providers, hoping to inform public policy decisions. He reported that when centers were following multiple safety protocols, as they usually do, there did not appear to be an elevated risk of spreading COVID from children to adults. However, community-level transmission was a significant factor in childcare providers testing positive and being hospitalized. So there was safety within childcare centers. Communities needed to really make sure that they were practicing social distancing, mask wearing for those centers to be able to really be safe. But inside the centers, there was usually quite a good amount of safety. Researchers at the Center for the Study of Childcare Employment in Berkeley reminded us that while most K-12 schools closed, childcare centers were encouraged to remain open and with some challenges. In the third edition of the Early Childhood Workforce Index, which was just released last month, they summarized some of the challenges that childcare was facing in the following quote. It's a long one, but I think it summarizes what we found very nicely. And they begin their quote with, "Unlike public schools, when childcare programs close, there's no guarantee that early educators will continue to be paid. Even as providers try to keep their doors open to ensure their financial security, the combination of higher costs to meet safety protocols and lower revenue from fewer children enrolled is leading to job losses and program closures. Many of these closures and job loss are expected to become permanent. Over the course of the first 8 months of the pandemic, 166,000 jobs in the childcare industry were lost. And as of October of 2020, the industry was only 83% as large as it was in February prior to the pandemic. So the impact on jobs is very real. We have researchers in New York, Kate Tarrant and Mark Nagasawa, who analyzed data from over 3,000 respondents to a survey of New York State early childhood professionals. And they reported that within the state, workforce providers indicated that emotional stress was often more significant than health and financial stress. Those who were working remotely were struggling to deliver engaging and developmentally appropriate instruction. They had new demands for documentation, and figuring out how to use technology to partner with families in a meaningful way was challenging. The researchers also found that New York State programs that were funded through parent fees were more likely to close and be forced to furlough or lay off staff. In the midst of this, these educators remained committed to providing high quality care and wanted to reopen, but had no idea how or when. If we look at family childcare, Juliette Bromer and her colleagues at the Erickson Institute reported that providers who stayed open faced multiple barriers as they tried to offer safe and sustainable childcare. They often lacked access to affordable and adequate health and safety supplies. They faced new, confusing, and sometimes conflicting requirements. Sometimes workers had longer hours than usual. Many of the providers feared for their own health and the health of their own household members. Remember, many of these providers did not have healthcare insurance. And many experienced decreases in enrollment that had a negative effect on their income. However, again, family childcare providers also took pride in their work as essential workers who helped keep the economy running. So if we look now at preschool, researchers at the National Institute for Early Education Research at Rutgers reported that participation at the center-based preschool programs was significantly below the pre-pandemic levels. There were lower rates of identification of children with disabilities and difficulty providing services to children who required them. There were higher levels of social emotional difficulties reported in young children and challenges meeting the nutritional needs of children who receive meals in programs. Parents reported that they themselves were experiencing stress, losing jobs, and having to suffer reduced wages in many cases. So the overall picture is one of families under significant stress and professionals who take pride in their work and want to do their jobs well. However, the workforce is often without the financing and support structures necessary to keep their essential services operating. So given this somewhat bleak outlook, I'm very pleased by the responses of the EduCare partners and their focus on family engagement and high quality teaching and supporting the workforce. I think these are the kinds of responses that help staff to really move through. I look at Winnebago and this notion of supporting family, of thinking about community and collaboration, and really thinking through how we are going to get through this together. As someone said, this was new. It was new to everybody. It was new to the planet. So there was no guidebook on how to make this work, and really trying to continuously connect to families is really critical. The work in Tulsa of creating these extraordinary videos and really just thinking about what that means to have children having to wear masks and how do they understand that, and then thinking through what it's like to create videos with teachers and children with and without masks, I thought was brilliant. And as well as reading stories, teachers recording their stories in English and Spanish as well. I think, one of my favorite cities is New Orleans. I have to say that I have a soft spot in my heart for that. And New Orleans is community. I think that the notion of how you come together under difficult circumstances and you think about the people. And so the Fridays of the mental health Fridays and thinking through how you can support each other is something that is clearly indicated in the research as being needed. And I think each of these programs has really focused on how they can do the work of trying to meet children's needs, but also to think really carefully about what educators need and parents, and that is really huge. Another just overarching issue has been funding, and I think the stable funding that one can have is absolutely a blessing. So where are we overall? I think working with children in general and with young children in particular is not a highly valued skill in the United States, even when we have strong science telling us that the early years of a child's life are critical and that well-prepared adults are essential. It's an irony, I think, of the English language that one can be simultaneously essential and undervalued. Because in this pandemic, essential meant you have to go to work, you must engage in close contact with other people while the rest of the population is sheltered at home. And early childhood professionals working in the context of this undervalued profession are also facing the intersection of race and gender, with women of color constituting at least 40% of this workforce and nearly half of early educators earning poverty wages that must often be supplemented by public assistance. In too many instances, we've paid for high quality early care and education programming on the backs of Black and brown women. We've asked them to love and protect and educate other people's children while their own families live in poverty and under debilitating stress. The conditions under which early educators work and the devastating impact of some of those conditions have on the educators, their families, and the children they serve have been known for a very long time. So this is not new news. What COVID did was to highlight and exacerbate situations. The EduCare network and the good work described here today demonstrate that efforts can be made to support educators who work with young children. However, as a country, it's past time to build a coherent system of early care and education that prepares, compensates, and supports educators who are on the front lines supporting young children and their families. So I will stop there for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'd like to keep Jacqueline up and welcome back our EduCare Learning Network panelists as well. Jacqueline, we just really appreciate those reflections. If I was in the same room with you, I'd give you like a high five or a fist bump or something like that, because everything you said just Cynthia's giving you a thumbs up. You're welcome to join us, Cynthia. Just everything you said just resonated so readily with our experiences on our work. I want to give Amy, Sharita, and or Brenda an opportunity to kind of react to Jacqueline's remarks and see if you had any thoughts there. And then we do have one question from the audience and one kind of wrap up question as well. But I wanted you all to share your thoughts on anything that Jacqueline had to say.
Yeah, Jacqueline, I think whatever you said, it just resonated with me. That's in my thoughts. Like, my dream is to see early childhood educators as professionals, valued as professionals by the society. So I really want to work for that. I'm doing everything I can to, make teachers feel that they are professionals and, conduct themselves as professionals. So I think it just brought tears in me when you were talking. I just loved it. It was a beautiful reflection and my dream. I don't know, by the end of my, professional time, I should be able to see that. But I think it's there in every part of the world, everywhere we are working on, pulling this profession up. I would like to see youngsters willingly wanting to come into this profession, not as a last resort. That just pains.
Amy or Sharita, did you all want to share any thoughts on Jacqueline's remarks? Or
I was amazed on everything she said, and I just connected to a lot of words she was saying, and also this made me put in the mindset of that we have to really be here for our staff mentally and also for our families. Outside of the research-based activities that we do, we still have to put our families' mental state first. And instead of treating people like, just treat them like family, treat them like someone that we care about and someone that, you know, we're here for families. So we need to be more cognitive of how we treat them and how they're feeling going through this pandemic right now. So when she was talking like Louisiana, New Orleans is like family, and that's really honestly how we feel about our families. It's a connection, it's a bond. When they're hurting, we're hurting. So it was just like, yeah, she get it. I mean, like I really felt like she was listening to me, listening to my struggles. So yes, thank you.
One of the questions that came in from the audience was about any professional development or learning that you had for any other comments about professional development or learning that you had for staff in your schools or within your organizations that we didn't kind of hit on already. We talked about self-care, we talked about diversity and equity inclusion, any other things that you kind of honed in and focused in on your health and safety protocols. We talked about those. Any other things that you honed in or focused in on your support and professional learning supports to staff?
I think we did a lot on what the families would be undergoing now with all the, you know, joblessness in the market and many people losing their jobs, struggling to get their food requirements met. A lot of other trauma shooting up because of domestic violence and other things, what children are undergoing, and having that, thought in mind when families are coming to us. If they are not able to respond properly, it can be due to the trauma. They are not able to hear what we are saying in the right way. And that was a very big, I wouldn't say we did it as a professional development, but it was a huge discussion that we had with the teachers to think about those families. As teachers, I think in Tulsa, our agency really took very good care and everyone was, taken care really well. But what about the families who are in the outside world, right? So we had a lot of food insecurities and other things. So being more sensitive to that. So that was a very huge discussion we had as a full school.
Thank you. On that, Amy, you want
to
please do.
Add for us, when we reopened, went to 4 days a week, and so that left Fridays open. There was a lot of professional development with staff, but we also did more PLCs with staff, so peer learning committees were working towards the goals, but also, what our families needed too. So I just wanted to add that helped our staff work together.
On this similar thread or topic, we've talked about care for children and families. We've talked about care and support and professional learning for our staffs. We have an astute question, which is, what supports and care did you receive as program leaders and where did those come from?
I received a lot of support from our leadership and also my team. Like I said, I was a master teacher and I had a very supportive team. They understood the pandemic, and also my co-teachers, my co-master teachers, they had family members that had COVID, and just the understanding of what's going on and just being afraid. And a lot of people lost family members. So we was our own support network. Like I said, my supervisor, Miss Angie Blau, very supportive. Any concerns or anything that we needed, it was basically there. We had Kingsley House have a hotline if you needed any assistance, and also if you needed to seek some medical attention, just to talk to someone. That was an open line. So it was just knowing that we had support there. It really just helped us mentally. I feel for me and my team. I can say for Educare New Orleans, I feel that we received the mental health that we needed. And we're still dealing with it, because they still have families that have sick ones or family members that are still losing family members. So, yeah.
Wonderful. I'm going to direct the next one to you, Jacqueline, as the first person to respond, but others feel free to do so as well. This question notes that full funding from Head Start throughout every phase of the pandemic enabled Educare schools to retain most, if not all, of their workforce, much like public K-12 schools. But as you pointed out, this is an anomaly in childcare sector. How can we use this reality check of the pandemic to lead to wholesale changes to the way that the general public and policymakers address early learning en masse moving forward?
So funding has been an issue in early childhood since we've been talking early childhood. There's never enough money. But we have, in many cases, and I think, as a former policy person, I'll take blame for this. We've decided that we've got a model that can function if we don't pay people well. And I think we do that in this country. We've decided that some people will work really hard all day long and they'll still be living in poverty. And that's a societal problem that I think we have to address. But in early childhood, I think we've really, we argue about should it be $9 an hour or $11 an hour or $15 an hour. You're still not even making $35,000 a year. You're still struggling with all of that. So it is the living wage that I think we need to start talking about. What is it that folks need to? I live in the Northeast, in New Jersey, right outside of Princeton. If you're making $15 an hour, you're struggling. So I think that we've got to figure out what this is. Is it just a funding issue? And we can, as funders, we can support models of different kinds of funding. It's also a social justice issue to me. I really think we need to start looking at it as part of a systemic racism, I think. And I think I said to Amanda, I'm not at all convinced that if this field was really run by white men, that we would be talking about $9 or $15 an hour. We'd be talking about bonuses and profit sharing. And it is how you value work. If work is essential, then you pay for it. And it may not come easily. I think we've got to start thinking about elevating the voices and the power of the people doing the work. Researchers can talk and write lovely reports, but that's not where the power goes. The power goes in folks saying, we are worth this. We are a profession. It's not like you need to wait for somebody to decide you are a profession. You are. There is skill and there is value in you and in the work you do. So I think we have to come together as a public relations activity to inform the public, but also to internalize our worth, the value of our work, and to come together and elevate the voices of the people doing that work in a much more powerful way, to take on that power and really start to say, this needs to be adjusted in a very meaningful way. I mean, benefits even. So there are places where people don't get benefits. That's crazy. So changing our mindset, changing the mindset of the public, changing the mindset of advocates to listen more to the people doing the work, and changing and lifting up and elevating the voices of the people doing the work seem to me to be something really important that we're going to try to support as much as we can. I don't know if that answered the question, but you're on mute, Amanda.
Thank you. It did beautifully. Thank you so much. A real call to action. Unfortunately, it's come time for us to say our thank yous and goodbyes. But I hope, I just want to say thank you all. I don't know. I think we had a thank you slide and a resources slide that we're going to pull up now. But just really want to extend my cup overflows with gratitude to all of you, to our esteemed webinar panelists, to Dr. Jacqueline Jones as our national experts for your call to action, and for your words today that have really helped us to reflect on the current circumstances and situations that face us in the field, and really to view the valuing of the early childhood workforce as a social justice issue to be elevated, and that we can be part of elevating that. So thank you so much to all of our Educare school leaders and staff, to the network researchers and local evaluation partners who were involved in this research, to my co-authors on these publications, to our funders and donors and partners, and especially to our children and families in the Educare Learning Network. We also wanted to share and make available to you all as our attendees some resources. You can find all of these resources on educareschools.org, inclusive of the full-length COVID-19 research snapshots called our Educare Insight Snapshots. Access our policy and advocacy tools. Jacqueline, you were mentioning some research on family childcare. Many of our Educare organizations are involved in early Head Start childcare partnerships, and they have family childcare providers as their partners. And we do also have a series on those partnerships and their experiences during COVID as well. So you can find those on educareschools.org. And if you're interested in bringing Educare to your community in the form of a professional development series, we also have our Essential Practices of Educare professional development series. So just wanted to make sure that people were aware of those resources. And again, hats off to all of my fellow panelists and presenters today. We really appreciated and enjoyed this time together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks all. The recording will be available and the materials will be available online and in a follow-up to all that registered as well. And any questions we didn't get to, we can extend responses in our follow-up. So thank you all.
Thank you, Amanda. It was nice connecting to you, Jacqueline. And
Nice
Amy.
connecting to all of you. Thank you so much for the work you do. It's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.